In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. Chris, I'm now back from Las Vegas. We've had, 3 Las Vegas Summer League games under our belt now. 6 Summer League games in total for the Memphis Grizzlies. Grizzlies lost again last night. 96-84 to the Golden State Warriors. These late tips are killing me. I mean, the late tips are just so late. It's crazy.
You have already fallen out of regular season form.
Well, I know, and I also not to just take this podcast on a tangent right off the top, but man, it's the summer. This is when our sleep schedules are supposed to be somewhat normal, right? But no, that's just not happening because we got too much other stuff. But so there was another Grizzlies game. There were a few notable things, I think, from the game. The first being that Jemai Meshack continues to play well in the Summer League. I think that has been a very positive sign for the Grizzlies so far in Summer League. And for me, we had talked about it on previous pods that we thought he would be competing for a two-way spot, potentially with Zion Pullen. And it feels like, at this point, I'm ready to just say, you know what, Jemai Meshack should have a two-way spot. How about you?
I do feel that way, but I'm a little reluctant. But just because he's played 4 summer league games, I know it's like all we have to go on, and so
that's it.
Past performance does not guarantee future results, and past performance in 4 summer league games certainly does not guarantee future results in the NBA. But I do like what we're seeing from Jemai Meshack. I was looking at it this morning. He's only played 4 of the 6 games, by the way, so he's missed 2. So he's played 4 summer league games. 2 in Utah, 2 in Las Vegas. But in those 4 games, he's averaging 3.5 stocks, steals plus blocks a game, and that's in, 20-something minutes. It's not like heavy minutes. That's a lot of defensive activity, which is what you expect from him. And he's made 5 of 11 three-pointers, which, again, is kind of a small sample, but 5 of 11 is pretty promising, right? He's also had some good. He had 9 assists, I think it was, or something like that in the one game, and the assist numbers have been pretty good too. And so he was advertised as a guy who was a high level defender who'd give you a lot of activity and effort on the defensive end, and he's shown every bit of that. But he was also advertised as someone who didn't bring much on the offensive end, and I think some of the shooting and passing he's shown has been really promising. And so, based on what we've seen, my instinct would be go ahead and put him on the two-way. I don't think it needs a year of marinating before you start that process. But again, we're talking about 4 summer league games.
Jemai, to me, has been one of the most interesting things in summer league. And I have some thoughts about summer league overall we can get into. But, he is one part of this that's at least stood out. The quote of the night was that he said he felt like he was playing in an NBA Finals game yesterday before the fourth quarter was going to start, which is dramatic, but which also aligns a lot with what I've learned about Jemai in the days since I met him when we got out there at Summer League, which is that, and this actually struck me during the introductory press conference too. He's just a very intense person, I feel like the Grizzlies kind of need some of those personalities, but contrasted to somebody who's a little bit more happy-go-lucky, Gigi Jackson, versus
Right.
a Jemai. There is some contrasting personalities there. And I just think that to me has been the big thing. Obviously what he does on the court really matters, but I found it pretty interesting after the second Las Vegas Summer League game when we talked to him. He talked a lot about learning how to defend and we were asking about just sort of what makes him so unique on that side, and Isolo essentially told us, this is a player that has elite defensive feel. Like just the instincts are so good that, it allows him to take risks and gamble without it being true risks.
Right.
And that's the type of player that, this team was lacking last year. And so I think that
Well,
that,
that
that,
that
yeah.
was the Tony Allen story, right? Like Tony Allen, I don't know if I've ever seen anyone who could go for steals and still recover as
Mhm.
quickly and as well as Tony did. And part of that is athleticism, and part of that is instinct and feel. But that is sort of, that's part of the story of like great defenders, to be able to be disruptive without just being a guy who's just gambling and losing track of your man. To do both of those things together is not something everybody can do.
Yeah, I know, and I think that there's some comparisons to the Tony Allen. So I'm not saying that Jemai Mashak is Tony Allen. Oh my gosh, like he's
Right.
played 4 summer league games, but I think there are some comparisons in terms of learning his approach because, a lot of players will talk about like mentality or finding their shot or whatever it is when you talk to them. And Jemai Mashak almost exclusively talks about studying, like, and I feel like Tony was one of those that, when if you go back and watch the documentary, like kind of knew what the other player was going to do. And that's a sign of instincts and feel. And so I think the Grizzlies have been really encouraged by instincts and feel from Jemai. And then the offensive stuff is a plus. And even Jemai acknowledged, like, I thought after this, not last night, but the second Las Vegas Summer League game, essentially, I passed up some shots that I probably should have taken around the rim. Like if I want to be a more productive player on both sides of the ball, then I kind of have to make the defense respect me to some level that I'm a threat to attack the basket. And like he just seems like he's very smart and very in tune with what he needs to do to become a good NBA player. And so for me, I think all of those are really encouraging signs. And he's probably what has stood out the most, I think, from the start of Vegas Summer League. I'm hoping at some point to write about Jemai. I'm knocking on wood right now, but I think I'm supposed to talk to a pretty high profile person that knows Jemai pretty well later today. So, I'm looking forward to diving more into his background. But to me, he's really stood out because I think one of the stories from the summer league, Chris, is that not a whole lot has jumped out at me. Like we've
Yeah.
talked about in the past, summer league can kind of it doesn't suggest that a player is going to be a star or whatever. I think the way that you can correct me if I'm wrong, the way you phrase it is like, summer league, you can look great, but it probably means more if you look bad than if you look great.
Right.
And I'm not saying that the Grizzlies rostered players have looked bad, but there's been nothing that's really jumped off the page to me in these Salt Lake games. Like I think what Cam Spencer's done is kind of what we have expected Cam Spencer to do. Jalen Wells has been, you know, Jalen Wells, but he hasn't just absolutely dominated the summer league. So, to you, is this how do you look at this summer league from a big picture standpoint? Are you like me, where you just feel like there's really nothing that's really grabbed a hold of you, or is there some elements to this that have stood out?
Yeah, I think typically with Summer League, the most intriguing players are the new draft picks and maybe the highly regarded second year guys you're looking for the big jump from. For the Grizzlies, that would be Cedric Coward, who's not playing. Javon Small not playing. Um, there's really not a guy quite like that. I mean, Jalen Wells was a rookie last year, but I don't think anyone was expecting some huge jump. I think Jalen Wells is sort of a high floor, low ceiling kind of player already. Obviously, Zach Edey's not playing. That would have been interesting if he were playing. And so the guys like that around the league are like the Reed Shepard types, right? Those are the guys who are like most intriguing in summer league. It's the first round pick rookies, and it's the Reed Shepard kind of guys who were highly regarded guys who like maybe weren't all the way there as rookies, and you're looking for the big jump leap forward from those guys. So the Grizzlies roster didn't really have those kind of guys on it. I do think Meshack was probably the most interesting. Cam Spencer, 52% from three on pretty heavy volume has been good to see. He's been consistent in terms of his productivity. He scored at least 14 points in all 5 games he's played. But it doesn't leap off as like some proof of anything with him necessarily. Gigi Jackson has been a little bit of a mixed bag. I think what's best from him is I was looking at some of the summer league stuff this morning. So he's only played 4 games because he's had a couple DNPs, but he shot 68% on 2-point shots. And he has had very few turnovers, only 6 turnovers in 4 games. So that combination of like super efficient scoring inside the arc with very low turnovers, I think is a really encouraging sign for him. The 3-point shot has been hit and miss. He's 32% overall, That's the kind of thing where you have a good game, it jumps up to 38. You have a bad game, it jumps down to 20. I mean, I don't know, like whatever. But I think the getting to the rim, the aggressive offense inside the arc with low turnovers has been encouraging from Gigi. Jalen Wells is funny, man. He's shooting 35% from three in Summer League. It's only 5 games. He shot 35% from three as a rookie last year. 35% is fine, but it's not what people think about when they think of Jalen Wells. It's like people have the idea of him. It's like more than that. It's good enough that, like, given the level of defense he plays, like you're a rotation player if you're a 35% 3-point shooter playing that kind of defense. But I think the hope is that he's more of a 40% 3-point shooter. We'll see if that sort of comes in time. And that's about it, man. Like, Zion Pullen I think he's had a rough summer league. Javon Small played 1 game. I don't think any of the bigs have been particularly notable. And so it has not been the most interesting summer.
If I were to grade Summer League based on just overall vibe, I don't even know the correct grading term. Like, it's been a C or a C plus Summer League, I think, for the Grizzlies. Like, because you automatically have to dock maybe a letter grade for the fact that Cedric Coward isn't out there when everybody wants to see him. Like, I feel like you have to dock maybe not a full letter grade, but some more from the fact that Javon Small hasn't played. Then you've gotten some good stuff from Jemai Mashak. You've had a few decent performances from Cam Spencer, but I mean, honestly, there's not all that much that has really shown you or gotten you excited, I guess, about the next Grizzlies season. Maybe a little bit of Gigi.
It hasn't been, to me, a particularly notable summer league for rookies writ large. Like, Cooper Flagg only played 2 games. He was really good at one of them, and they shut him down. Dylan Harper, I think, has only played 1 or 2 games.
That's a good point. Yeah.
VJ Edgecombe had 1 great game and then sort of got hurt, and I think he's only played once since. Young Hansen Young, however you say that, has gotten a lot of attention. I don't think he's really necessarily been that great. He's had some good plays, and people are really primed to get excited about him. But overall, it's just been okay. I think sort of the best players have been some of these second-year guys who maybe weren't like stars coming out of their rookie year, but have really seemed like they've taken a step forward. Terrence Shannon Jr., I think, has been really good for Minnesota. And that's a guy who they need to be in the rotation next year. I think Reed Shepard's a really important player in the league, given the team he's on and the lack of guards on that team. He's generally been pretty good, but not like fantastic. The leading scorer, here's a trivia question who is the leading scorer in the Las Vegas Summer League?
I have no idea.
It is a second-year big man on a bad team.
A Hornet?
A guy who we discussed, because I had him on my list, a guy who we discussed in our pre-draft stuff last summer.
Oh my gosh. I have no idea, Chris. Tell me.
Kyle Filipowski.
Oh, I should have known that. I know Kyle played pretty well.
Yeah.
I should have known that. I don't know. The Jazz they're not the first team your mind goes to.
No, not at all.
Because they're basically playing their regular starting 5 in Summer League, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It is true. I think that's a good point. I don't think that there's been any of those like monster performances, and Cooper Flagg was inefficient in his first game. I don't think that says anything about Cooper Flagg, but we didn't get the showdown I think that everybody wanted in the first Summer League game. And I think it's been a little bit slower and of less interest this summer than it has in the past. A couple other things before we move on from Summer League to other stuff. Will Magnay played last night for the Grizzlies.
Do we know why he hadn't played to that point?
He was dealing with an injury. I'm not
Okay.
sure what it was. They announced it or told us, but I just don't remember it.
Yeah.
Um, I think that there's been some interest in watching some of the other bigs around the league and who's available on the Grizzlies roster, because it feels like it would make sense for the Grizzlies to add a two-way big going into the
Yep.
season to have a little bit more front court depth or at least a break in case of emergency sort of front court player, given the injuries. And I think Will Magnay was a player that they wanted to see play in summer league, and he had what, 6 rebounds, not a ton of points. I mean, didn't jump off the page to me, but I think it was notable that he did play in the game because I think that that is somebody that there could potentially be interest in depending on how he plays. Alex Reese just randomly showed up on the Grizzlies bench in the second Las Vegas Summer League game. Alex Reese played on a two-way contract for the Thunder and the Sixers last year. And I don't know if he's going to play. I think he's dealing with a heel injury,
Right.
but I think the Grizzlies wanted to get a look at him. And then, of course, there's other bigs around the league, but I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody that's really stood out. What do you think?
So I think that I don't know whether Will Magnay or Alex Reese will be on a two-way for the Grizzlies, but I think the fact that those are two guys that they brought in to sort of be into the program this summer to take a look at is it does tell us something in terms of the kind of player they're looking at, which is not just about position. When you think about the two-way slot and there's no one way you can use it. There's a few different ways you can use it. The most obvious way to use it is it's called a developmental league, right? You're trying to develop a young player who you think can graduate to your main roster and be meaningful to you. You're trying to grow a main roster player, right? And the Grizzlies have done that a ton. And that's the idea with a lot of these guys. A lot of guys on the Grizzlies roster started that way, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's the idea with Javon Small if it works out, and if Jemai Mashak is on the two-way, which I think he will be at some point, that's going to be the idea with him. You could also use the two-way to think about it as you're really trying to bolster your G League team, which is sort of what the Jacob Yarger thing was, even though he ended up playing for a lot for the Grizzlies that season.
Yuki.
The Yuki, I think that was either we're trying to bolster our G League team, or I don't know, maybe we're trying to make money in Japan, or trying to bring some excitement, some fun, whatever. But it wasn't a development. That was an odd one because it wasn't a development thing really. It also wasn't the third thing I'm gonna cycle back to with Reese and Magnay. The other thing you can use the two-way for is just pure depth for your main roster, short-term depth. Will Magnay is 26, 27 years old.
27, yeah.
27. I think Alex Reese is 23, 24, something
No,
like
he's
that.
he's like 26.
Is he 26? Okay.
Yeah.
So these are guys who are older guys. They have played professionally overseas, but they are not really prospects. These are not, you never know. I don't want to close the door. Maybe they pop off and suddenly they're on 3-year contracts with the main roster. But they are not guys who are projected to be that really. And so I think the interest in that kind of guy is about having someone on a two-way who can fill in and add depth for your main roster this season. And maybe not beyond this season, but for this
Maybe not
season.
beyond half of the season.
No, that's right. That's exactly right. And so
Right, yeah.
that is one way to use the two-way. And the fact that they are looking at guys like that, older guys who have played professionally, but aren't necessarily long-term prospects, instead of who's a 20-year-old big who may take a couple years, but there could be something there. That tells you something about what they want to do with one of those two-way spots this season.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Because those are not players that you would think are, have the potential to become a serious role player or starter in the league one day.
Right, but because what if it takes, let's say, 6 weeks into the season before Zach Edey appears, right? That's possible. Very possible. And what if Jock Landale turns an ankle and is going to miss 10 days, right? You may need someone on one of those two ways who can step in and give you 10 minutes a night, in an NBA game. And so I think they want someone like that if they can find them in one of those spots.
And they also, I don't know, do you think they have options outside of what they've got on the summer league roster? I don't know if there's anybody that's really been that impressive.
I don't think. I mean, I wrote sort of a cheeky thing before the summer league. Summer league, the search for the next Huff. The idea that like, who is this year's Jay Huff? Who is the guy who's on a summer league roster, who is not under contract going into next season, who still has 2-way eligibility, and you think can play? And I think that Huffs don't come around that often. Like the 28-year-old dude who's been one of the best players in the G League and still has eligibility, and no one has him under contract. Nearest I can tell, that guy is not out there this year. Is Adama Sanago that guy? Not the numbers he's putting up, right? I mentioned a guy like PJ Hall, who was on a 2-way last year with the Nuggets. He's not doing much in summer league. I think the Grizzlies are probably looking at guys like that, maybe even specifically those guys, maybe others. I don't think anyone jumps out as an obvious, like, let's wrap this guy up now. This is the guy. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they sort of kept their options open. Now, you can always, these are not guaranteed contracts. You could sign one of these guys to a 2-way and then just cut them if you see someone you like better. So they might do that. But I don't think they internally will feel like we have this slot locked up until like the season starts. I think you got to keep an eye out in training camp, see who gets cut from other teams in training camp on the eve of the season, that kind of thing. And so I don't see anyone out there who like is obvious, like this is the guy we're gonna put it in ink for the start of the season on a 2-way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that
Like it wouldn't surprise me if Reese and Magne were like on the you could bring them into training camp and have them competing for a spot at that point potentially.
I would not be surprised at all if that were to happen,
Right.
And then at least you could get a look because who knows, like you're gonna get a very limited look at Magne.
Right.
I'm not sure Reese is gonna play,
Right.
so I maybe those are guys that you use to to backfill the roster, but it doesn't feel like there's any clear or standout option. I can foresee.
And if those kind of guys, and I don't know what their situations are, so I'm just making stuff up. If they don't have offers like overseas or elsewhere they really, really like, to be on an NBA training camp roster, A, you're getting paid to be on a training camp roster.
Mhm.
And B, like if you're playing in preseason games, not only are you competing for a job with that team, like other teams are seeing you too, other international teams are seeing you. Like it's a pretty high profile thing to be. So I don't know whether one or both of those guys would be in that situation, but again, like I said, like you said too, it would not be surprising.
I could foresee Grizzlies fans being frustrated by the J Huff trade. you know, a month into the season if they're still dealing with injuries. But in the end, I don't think Jay Huff necessarily fit the style of Isolo. And I think that's probably why they made the trade. And
We have a
that's
little bit of breaking news. It won't be breaking news by the time people listen to this, but it just popped up on my phone while we're talking. And I had an inkling of this, but I not in a way I could report. But so Michael Scotto just reported on the Santi Aldama contract, and we can talk about some of this stuff. All these contracts got signed this week. So the 3-year, $52.5 million Santi deal has a team option in the third year that had not previously been out there.
okay. Well, that is definitely notable.
Yeah.
We did have two different contract changes. First of all, shout out Michael Scotto, very nice guy. Just talked to him recently. Um, and it's not often that the national guys will give the local reporters a little bit of love when we get some news, and he
Right.
did on the Ryan Saunders stuff, which we will talk about. So nice guy, really, really good guy. Anyway, yeah, we had two different bits of contract news. We had that and Cam Spencer. They increased the years on Cam Spencer, um, or the money, I should say, on Cam
No,
Spencer.
no, no. The years, I mean, both, but the
Both.
years I think more notably.
Um, what did you make of that before we get to Santi? I mean
So
that was interesting to me. It reflects some belief in him, I
well,
suppose.
it is the kind of contract the Grizzlies typically do in this situation, right? You go back to all the other guys who have come off of 2-ways onto the main roster, whether that's really all of them, like Scottie Pippen, Jay Huff, Vince Williams, Gigi Jackson. I think even like Kenneth Lofton Jr. and Killian Tilly back in the day. Like they like to give these guys and some of the second round picks, Kennedy Chandler and Jalen Wells, the same thing. The Grizzlies like to give guys they think could be good 3 4 year contracts at these that's at this level that's sort of close to a minimum salary. It's not the minimum. It has to be a little bit more than that to get a 3 or 4 year deal. But they like to give these longer deals that lock guys in on cheaper contracts and also have team options on the back. This one is the team option Cam Spencer on the 4th year. 3rd year is actually fully guaranteed, but team option on the 4th year. So they like to do these kind of deals. And it's great when they work out, they're great. You got a bargain, right? Like look at the Scottie Pippen deal now, look at the Jalen Wells deal now. Sometimes they don't work out and you end up having to eat the money, which happened with Kennedy Chandler. But I think their belief, and I agree with this, is that hitting on one of these small contracts is worth 2 or 3 misses. Like the positive value is so much greater than the negative cost of deals like this that I think they like to do that. So why didn't they do that from the jump with Cam Spencer might be the question. Because it was announced as a 2 year deal initially, right? So to do a contract like this, to do a contract that goes beyond 2 years, it has to be for more than a minimum salary. The minimum salary can only run for 2 years. And there's an exception for that. It's actually called the minimum salary exception. So you don't have to use cap space or anything else to do a 2 year minimum salary contract, which is what the initially reported deal was with Cam Spencer. But to do the 3 4 year deal, you have to go beyond the minimum, which means you either have to use cap space or you have to use a free agency exception. Some of these deals in the past, like the Grizzlies just used their free agency exceptions because people think about they didn't use their MLE. Well, they used it partly on Gigi Jackson and partly on Vince Williams and stuff like that. So with this one, I had been worried from the jump that the Grizzlies were going to be so focused on doing this kind of deal with Cam Spencer that they would use part of their room exception, which is the only free agency exception they had to do it. And I was happy to see they did not do that. They threw every penny of that at Ty Jerome to get the better player in Ty Jerome instead of saving $2 million of it for Cam Spencer. They used it all on Ty Jerome. So they used all the free agency money on Ty Jerome, their exception money on Ty Jerome. And they thought, I think at the time, that they might need all of the cap space they could create for Jaren. Because at the time they didn't have enough for Jaren. They were gonna have to create more. So I think they thought they might need all of their cap space for Jaren. So they got Cam Spencer to agree to the 2 year deal. But it's an agreement. It's not a contract. Remember when all this stuff came out publicly. And I think what happened was the J Huff trade happens and the Cole Anthony buyout and stretch happens. And the amount of money they needed to do the Jaren deal they were able to create all of that with the Cole Anthony buyout and stretch, which meant they didn't really need to use any of that extra money they created from the J Huff trade to do the Jaren deal. That left extra money to do Cam Spencer, to use cap space to sign Cam Spencer instead of the minimum exception. And so basically they used the J Huff salary slot for Cam Spencer in a way that they didn't know up front they were going to be able to do. So now you're able to do Cam Spencer on a 4 year deal with cap space. And so you do the Jaren deal and the Cam Spencer deal that brings you to the cap, and then you go over the cap for the Santi, Ty Jerome, and Jock Landale deals. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, no, that made sense to me. And then with Santi, to have the team option in the 3rd year, the timing, I guess, is interesting to some degree. I think that there's a reason that they would want to do that, correct?
Well, I mean, if you're a team, you'd like to have a team option in every year, right? And so it's better what you can get. I actually don't have a strong sense of the logic from both. Obviously, if the Grizzlies, you'd love to have the team option. Players want player options, right? But in terms of why Santi would go for that or what the negotiation was, I don't know. I could make stuff up. I really don't know the answer to this. Maybe the Grizzlies want to do a 4 year deal and lock him in, and Santi didn't want to be locked in that long. And the Grizzlies said, well, if we're only going to do 3, we'll give us a team option in the 3rd. But maybe that's how it went down. I really don't know. But obviously that was the subject of negotiation.
Well, that would take him to what? How old is he now? Is he 24 or 25, Santi? That takes him to age 20. That's like middle of his prime.
Right.
I think that, if you're the Grizzlies and you're wanting to see how this works out, a team option
the thing about the
team player like that is interesting.
The thing about the team option is it can go different ways. It could be it doesn't, and we don't think this is going to happen with Santi Aldama, but if something doesn't work out and you just don't want the player, you can just, decline your team option and get off of him completely. But it could go the other way. Maybe you love it so much you want to wrap him up more. You could decline that team option and sign a new contract instead of and avoid the free agency at the end of it if you come to an agreement, right? So it opens pathways both to have Santi for fewer than 3 years. It also opens pathways to lock him up for more than 3 years.
When you look at what the Grizzlies did with their staff at Summer League and knowing what we know now that they're hiring Ryan Saunders as their lead assistant, is anything notable to you?
Ryan Saunders is
So wait, can we back up for a second? So at
yeah
Summer League, you had Isolo, which we can talk a little bit about. I did a two extended interviews with him, so that I thought I got a lot of interesting stuff. You had Isolo coaching the team. You had Jason March. You had Eric Schmidt and Brian Penny Collins, who they hired as a player development. I don't know if he's going to be an assistant coach, but he's at least a player development coach. Those were the guys that were on the bench at Summer League coaching the team,
the front row guys. Yeah,
the front row guys. Um, and then now, you add Ryan Saunders in and they're obviously going to make more hires to the staff. I don't think
right.
Anthony Carter is going to be back. Um, so I think there's more to come here in terms of assistant coaching hires. Um, but I don't know. Did you make any note of who was there, the moves that they've made? I thought to get someone that has previous head coaching experience was relevant. And to get somebody who's been coaching the defensive side of the ball quite a bit, because most of what we hear about Isolo and strategy, a lot of it is offensive minded stuff. So I thought it was, if you're trying to check boxes for hiring a lead assistant, that Ryan Saunders checks a lot of those boxes. But did you make any note of the coaching stuff?
It's an interesting name. Because the guy who's been a head coach briefly and in a bad situation. It's actually the Ryan Saunders hiring as a lead assistant. And let me be careful because I don't intend this to say this will go the same route because that's not my point at all. But on the front end, the Ryan Saunders as the lead assistant to Thomas Isolo is roughly similar to JB Bickerstaff as lead assistant to David Fisdale in an earlier era, and that you had a young first time head coach, Fisdale Isolo, but the from a distance resume of Ryan Saunders is pretty similar to JB Bickerstaff. Both young guys, but young guys who have a lot of experience already. Both second generation coaches. JB Bickerstaff, the son of successful NBA head coach Bernie Bickerstaff. Ryan Saunders, the son of successful NBA head coach Flip Saunders. Both guys who had already developed reputations as quality assistants elsewhere. Both guys who had gotten opportunities as an interim and else otherwise to be a head coach, but not gotten good opportunities, like not put in position to win in those opportunities, but had been in that chair. And so it's sort of similar to that. And JB Bickerstaff was a great assistant coach and is now a really good head coach, multiple teams. But it's the kind of guy who brings that kind of experience with him. I think it's notable that he doesn't seem to be someone who has really a notable previous relationship with Isolo or with the organization. Unlike the other hire, Brian Collins, who, was a former teammate of Isolo.
Right.
This is not like I'm bringing in my guy. This is like we interviewed people and this was someone who we were impressed by, and I like that. I like that it's not just, it's a mix, right? Coaches often bring in their guys, their people, but it's good to go out and get other ideas from people you're not already close to and be able to be willing to bring other people into the organization who are not, relationship guys with you and who have their own pedigrees and their own track records. And so I think it probably speaks well of Isolo to bring someone in like that who is not, someone previously connected to him, who has been a head coach, who has experience with multiple other NBA organizations. I think that speaks well of Isolo to bring in somebody like that to be his lead assistant.
Yeah, I think that was a point I was going to make. And I think it aligns with what he said in the interview with me because I was just talking to him about his background, how he got into basketball, life now in the States, and there's interesting stuff there. His youngest doesn't know how to speak English, right? And he's living in Memphis, and that's hard. And there's other elements to this, but one of the most interesting things I think he had to say was he could pinpoint the exact day he feels like, his coaching trajectory changed. And that was the day he finally decided, you know what, if I try to coach the team in a way and in a thinking where I'm trying to to provide for my players what I would have liked as a player, that's not going to get me very far, right? I need to do what's best for the team overall, even if it's uncomfortable for me. And I
Right.
feel like this is a hire where he may not be best friends with Ryan Saunders, and maybe there is a connection there, and we just haven't figured it out yet. I suppose that's possible, but I feel like this is along those lines. It aligns with what he said there in terms of like he said killing the player inside of me, so to speak, like basically just getting rid of the way that I used to think about the game.
He
Um,
he's doing I think there's some Game of Thrones reference buried in that.
Maybe there is.
Kill the boy and let the man live or whatever. That's a Game of Thrones line.
It's been a while since I watched Game of Thrones. I should know that reference, but it's
Tomo
eluding me.
Tomo Isalo, King of the North from Finland.
Um, yeah, yeah, exactly. So obviously, I thought that the hire was notable, and I don't think that that's going to be the last hire that they make. I
No.
think that there will be more to come this summer as it relates to the coaching staff. But I did make note of that. Trying to think. The other thing that happened was Jaw talked.
There is one prior relationship though with Ryan Saunders we know about, and that's with Contavious Caldwell Pope because he
Yeah,
coached on that Nuggets team that won the title. Well, KCP was the starter.
that's right. That's right. Well, the other notable thing that happened at Summer League was Ja talked, and Ja
Sort
showed up.
sorta. He talked reluctantly,
He talked reluctantly. I
which is
asked
fine.
him.
If
He
I were
talked
him,
on
I would.
ESPN.
If I were him, I would also talk reluctantly, so I don't cast aspersions at that. But yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean, he did talk on ESPN, so I just asked him if he'd talk to the local guys, and he gave us a few things. I mean, he talked about being shocked that the Bain trade happened, but he said he thought it was best for both sides. What do you think of what do you make of Josh saying he was surprised by the Bain trade?
I think we're going to be simpatico in this. I suspect that there was I don't think Zach Kleiman set him down on the day of the final media session and said we're trading Desmond Bain. But I think it was known that there might have that a potential shakeup was coming, and I think John knew he was not going to be the one shooken up, right?
I think maybe what he meant was that it didn't feel real, you
Yeah,
know?
no, I can see that. Even
Like
if you
I
know it's coming, it still feels surprising, right?
right. That's what I think he might have meant by that. Um, And then he didn't say much about Cedric Coward. He said he thought Ty Jerome is a really good player and will be a really helpful, secondary ball handler in the backcourt. Um, and he was, impressed with that move. He, like the rest of us, except for maybe you, Chris, suggested he has no idea how the cap works,
Right.
and said he thought Jaron should have gotten more money.
Hey, Ja,
um,
hey, Ja, if you're listening, let's grab coffee and we'll talk salary cap, man. I'll be the salary cap tutor. I'll even pick up the check
oh man,
next time I'm in town. Let's find a coffee
you're
shop
gonna pick up the check? That's
at a coffee
dangerous territory.
at a coffee shop at a coffee
At a
shop.
coffee shop. Okay.
The menu is limited at a coffee shop.
Yeah. No, I think that Ja's definitely not alone in that.
Right.
Stuff is so complex.
Uh,
It's just
uh,
crazy.
Speaking of Coward, who you brought up, he did talk last night on the broadcast. I did a
He
sideline interview
did.
with him, and he came across he's very polished, in a way that feels like genuine and natural, like naturally polished, right?
Hmm.
But he was asked. I thought the most interesting part of it was he was asked, how many of the Grizzlies veterans have you got to know or talk to? And he said all of them except for Santi because he's in Spain getting married. And then he looked in the camera and said, "Congratulations, by the way." So that's good. That's good that he has at least been on the phone with like everybody on the team. It sounds like.
Yeah, Santi did get married. Santi's had a big week.
Yeah.
Santi got married in Spain. Desmond Bain and Steven Adams were there. Uh, two of his close friends on the Grizzlies. But although everybody wanted to make a big deal of
Right.
the pushing each other at the end of the year, those guys were close. Um, and I thought that was just, I don't know, it was just kind of cool to see them all together in Spain and celebrating that. And then also got named to the board of directors for the Players Association Foundation, which
Hey,
I
who
got
doesn't? Let me break it just briefly. Who doesn't want a reality television series that's just Steven Adams goes to weddings?
Steven Adams goes to weddings.
The
Steven
wedding
and
guest.
Santi together is pure comedy.
The wedding guest with Steven Adams. Let's make. I think Netflix. Call me.
There's going to be one day in the future some great stories to tell about those two and the trouble that they are able to stir up. Steven and Santi together. It's pure comedy. But yeah, no, that would be amazing. I would totally watch that. Steven Adams just needs a reality show in general. He was just doing he's a bit of a TV star. You know, he was in the AT&T commercials during March Madness not too long ago. And then he was in a commercial for milk in New Zealand.
Wholesome.
He was doing yeah. He was doing milk commercials in New Zealand. What a guy. I've now totally lost my train of thought.
We're talking about Santi's other duties.
Oh, yeah. He got named to the Players Association Foundation Board of Directors. I got a little bit of insight on that. And essentially, you know, it's not the Players Association, it's the Players Association Foundation. So they do all of the philanthropic work for the Players Association, essentially. And by bringing in Santi, it was like, you know, he's going to be able to bring some global perspective on how to help outside of the states and stuff. But obviously, that's a big honor, and so he and Moses Moody are now part of the Players Association Foundation board, which is another Grizzly that's representing the league or the players of the league at large, which I think is pretty cool. Before we wrap up, is there anything else on Summer League that we didn't talk about? Is there anything about this team that stands out to you, Chris, that we haven't discussed quite yet? Because I think that's it for me. That's all my notes I had today.
No, I feel like the team seems pretty well wrapped up. The only other contract note we didn't talk about, the Jaren stuff came out, and if you're a Super Cap nerd, it was a little interesting because it was it was not a max extension, even though it was reported as a max extension, but it was a $240 million extension. I was very confused when that was first reported as the $240 million max because there was no way to think about it as a max in which the number would be $240 million. Ends up it is $240 million in totality. But the raises are smaller than like the max allowed, and it doesn't end up like if he gets to the fifth year of that, it's like $8 or $9 million less than like it could have been. And so there's a little more breathing room in that contract than I thought there would be.
Okay. Notable. Yeah, so I think that will probably wrap it up for us today. Make sure you are going and reading our stuff over at the Daily Memphian. Chris had a story off of the game last night. Like I said, we did an interview with Ja. You can go read that. There's some stuff on Isolo and his background and the challenges of being an NBA head coach in Memphis now, and as well as a feature on Gigi Jackson that we talked about last week. Hopefully, pretty soon here, something on Jemai Meshack. Again, I'm going to knock on wood and hope that this interview happens today. But thank you so much for listening. Keep listening to all our other Daily Memphian podcasts. But for Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.